Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I hope you guys are all having an amazing day so far. In this video, we will be creating a huge mega mansion in The Sims 4 once again, and this one is primarily inspired by very huge British manors that you would probably see like around like countrysides or whatnot. And we're actually building this in one of my favorite lots, which is the one in Brindleton Bay on the 64 by 64 lot, which has this sort of like oceanfront sort of like lot vibe to it. And I just felt like it was just like a great space to build this very huge British manor that I had in mind. And I did actually get inspired to build this primarily because I've seen just like one single AI image from Pinterest, and I just really love the way it looked. And I just felt like it kind of made sense to sort of like incorporate a British sort of design to it, and just like, yeah, just make something unique and interesting for you guys. And yeah, I hope you guys do actually enjoy the video and like the build enough to like sort of download it and play with it, as I really did like sort of enjoy building this, and I'm just really excited to show you guys how I sort of like went about doing it and creating it. So we're actually starting off with the actual exterior and sort of like shape and design of the home. And since I didn't really have a lot of like images and whatnot to go off of, most of this had to sort of just like be adjusted as I was like building it and progressing throughout the video. So yeah, I wasn't really like building a lot of these like rooms and like spaces and whatnot. I just had to like build as many like walls as possible around and just like get a feel and a shape and like a just like a general idea of how I wanted the layout to sort of like be. So the back garden of the home has this very intricate and detailed design to it, which had so many different like compartments of the home sort of like sticking out from the main rectangle of the home, and I just felt like that looked really interesting. And the main thing that really makes this home look really interesting is, I believe, is like the roofing, primarily because you just use so many of those like wedged roof pieces that sort of like stack on top of each other, and it just makes the home look really interesting rather than making it look like it's like really confusing, or just like, yeah, it just like adds a lot of like detail and charm to the home overall. And you guys can pretty much see most of the roofing is pretty much already done right now, as I did skip most of it just to like not bore you guys with me going through the roofing, which was quite a lot of trial and error just to sort of like get the shape that I wanted. And you will see me adjusting the build throughout the entire video quite a lot, mainly because I just really wanted to get every single room and shape to be like aligned properly and to make sense, so that not all the rooms were like overly huge and just like unnecessarily big, if that makes sense. And we do also add a bunch of details throughout the home as well, such as like the gutters, as well as like some balconies and whatnot throughout the areas. And we actually have this very sort of like modern tiled sort of brick or like wooden texture going on throughout the entire wallpaper for the exterior of the home. This does actually end up changing because I just felt like this looked a little bit too modern, and it wasn't really what I was going for, especially with that very sort of like muted like beigey sort of whitish color that it had going on at the moment. And that was a sort of like the goal that I was going for. I really wanted this like sort of orangey sort of stone brick sort of texture, which I eventually did end up finding something like that. And I just felt like it looks so nice, especially when you change the lighting settings and whatnot as you're playing throughout the game. It just makes it look a lot more interesting. And I also elevated the entire build just to make it feel a bit more interesting, just like adding a bit more like layers to the entire home, which I just feel like adding a foundation to the entire home, or even like playing around with the platforms, just make the home look a bit more interesting rather than leaving it all flat on the lot, especially because the entire area around most of the lots in the entire game are really flat. So it's really important to just put your entire houses on just like a foundation or just like a platform, and I feel like it just makes it look so much better. But it does also depend on like the style and the design of the home that you're going for. And we do also utilize that very nice French door design for the back garden of the home. And you might notice in certain areas of the home, we actually utilize this curved glass window on the second floor, but then we use these like wooden framed ones on the first floor. And I feel like that design sort of gave the illusion to the viewer that the room that those windows are in are sort of like in different wall height and ceilings and whatnot. So yeah, I was just playing around with like a lot of different window designs and textures just to get everything making sense and just like making it look a bit more interesting rather than like leaving it all like plain and boring, just like floor to ceiling windows, if that makes sense. For the main parts of the home, the windows that I utilized came from the Moschino as well as like the Get Famous expansion pack. And the main reason for that was because I just really like that curve that it had on the first floor that we're using, which is from the Get Famous pack, which has that very nice curve at the top of the window. And I just felt like that added a bit of extra details to the overall home. But on the second floor, I actually used the Moschino one, which came with like that really detailed sort of like squared sort of design windows, which I feel like look a bit more interesting, especially with like all those details that it has inside of the window itself. And we actually have a very interesting shape for the swimming pool. So I actually wanted to sort of like replicate the design that came from the reference image that I was looking at, which sort of had the same design for the back garden as well, which had this very nice like two semicircles on the same side of the rectangular sort of like swimming pool area. And I just felt like that design looked really interesting, especially because you wouldn't see a swimming pool in that shape like in real life quite often, and I just felt like utilizing and making that sort of like difference within this home as well. And I just felt like that made it like a little bit of an extra difference to sort of like the exterior of the home, just making it look a bit more interesting rather than leaving it like a boring rectangular shape, if that makes sense. And I actually utilize this darker green sort of color for the swimming pool because I feel like a lot of like homeowners in Britain who do have swimming pools wouldn't really like take care or like have a lot of maintenance unless it's like coming towards closer towards the summer, if that makes sense. Maybe that is not the case, but I just feel like that sort of like is the vision and like the thought that I get with like sort of like British swimming pools, if that makes sense. And we do also add a lot of details on top of the roofing as well, such as like a lot of chimneys as well as like a lot of solar panels. And we do actually utilize both types of solar panels on top of the roofing because I just felt like that looked a little bit more interesting. And I wanted to cover most of the home with those solar panels as well, just to make it feel a bit more like modern, as if it's like keeping in touch with the modern sort of like technology as well. Because this is pretty much like a old sort of like British manor that incorporates a lot of modern elements within it. And we do also incorporate a lot of this like soil sort of flooring texture throughout like parts of the home as well, especially on the back garden area, which has like this elevated part of the back garden, because I wanted to incorporate some greenery within the sort of like platform area as well. And we do also have a bunch of like different trees as well that sort of like match with the environment that is in as well. And that balcony is actually the main bedroom sort of balcony area, which is only accessible by them, unless you guys want to like sort of change the interior and just like change the entire floor plan if you guys want to do that. But yeah, we do also add a lot of greenery throughout this entire home. I actually really enjoyed utilizing this sort of like green sort of like grassy shrub sort of design around the edges of like the foundation area, mainly because it had that very bright white texture. And I know you can change it into like a different like yellowy color or whatnot, but it would always stick out, and I just felt like it made sense to sort of house it with a lot of greenery around it, just to make it feel a bit more interesting and lived in. And I feel like that really did work out pretty nicely, especially with it being like a British manor. And we do also have this very nice sort of ponds and like sort of like small sort of like sophisticated fountain designs going on throughout the entire home as well. And since we are working on this very huge lot, I was obviously not going to utilize every single corner or every single like tile of the entire sort of lot. So the way I went about doing that was just by like changing most of the sort of like area that I'm using into like this very dark green sort of color of the grass, just to make it feel a bit more luxurious. And we do also like cut off some corners of the actual lot area, just to make it feel a bit more realistic, because I feel like in real life homes you don't actually sort of like have a perfect sort of square or rectangular lot that you're working with. It's sometimes like in a triangular shape, or in some parts of like the corners are cut off or whatnot. So I wanted to sort of like replicate that sort of design in this game as well, just to make it feel a bit more realistic, if that makes sense. And that is sort of like the main goal that I have with most of the builds that I like creating in The Sims as well. I like creating these realistic looking builds just to make them feel a bit more like nice and interesting. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about this build in the comment sections below. I'd honestly love to know your thoughts and suggestions. If you guys have any suggestions or whatnot on what you guys think I should build, just let me know, and I'll also take it into consideration just to see like if it's viable and suitable, because I really do enjoy building these very extravagant and modern looking builds, but I always try to like focus on making them look a bit more interesting and unique. And they're all just like these very huge modern mega mansions, and it's really important to sort of like pick certain houses that look interesting and dynamic and can't really be that compared to each other. And as you guys saw earlier, I actually utilized this spray paint right at the edge of the lot, which doesn't always look great when you're in like play mode. So I obviously went back around the entire lot and just like erased parts of the sort of like edges of the lot that had that really sharp looking grass texture, which didn't really work out really nicely with the area of the rest of the green that we have around the area. So it's really important that I had to just go back and sort of just like blend it in and make it look a bit more nicer. But yeah, moving on to the interior of the home, I didn't really show the general like floor plan or layout that I was sort of going for. However, you can sort of like get a general understanding of the sort of like color scheme and whatnot. So we do have like these very nice detailed and wainscoted walls going on throughout the entire home, along with that very nice marble on the, and we're actually starting off with the sort of like main area of the home, which is the kitchen. And I just really love these life and death expansion pack kitchen cabinets. They are just so perfect, especially with this home in particular, because they have that very nice detailing on the cupboards itself, which I just feel like works super well with those wainscoted walls that we have going on throughout the entire home. And I was sort of puzzled with going with like what kind of color scheme I wanted to go with throughout this entire kitchen in particular, because I was really confused on like if I wanted to go for like a more whiter color with that sort of like grayish bluish countertop. But I felt like there was just like quite a lot of white, and I feel like this black color scheme that we have going on throughout the entire kitchen just works so well with sort of like contrasting with all the other elements of the rest of the home. And I just feel like it works really well in like trying to stand out from that really bright white color that we have going on for the flooring and the ceiling. And we do also incorporate a very nice island, and I just really love the mixture of like that brass slash gold color for the fixtures, as well as like the trims and like the small details that we have going on throughout the kitchen, which we do have a lot of these like gold elements throughout the entire home in general. So I just feel like it really fits in with the sort of design and idea of the style that I wanted for this house to have. And we do also incorporate a very nice sort of like dining area within the sort of like kitchen area. However, this is not the main dining area, this is sort of like the informal one. And I just really love incorporating those sort of like storage units, whether it's like the bedside shelf one or just like the general like shelf standing unit on its own throughout the entire home as well, because I just feel like it looks super nice and it just works really well with pretty much any single build you're trying to create. And on the other side of this main sort of kitchen area, we do have this very spacious living space, which I honestly really love the sort of like layout and design of. So we actually utilized the Dream Home Decorator modular sofa pieces because I really wanted to get that sort of L-shaped couch design with those armchairs on the other side of it, because I just felt like that looked really interesting, especially with that very huge 2 floor to ceiling glass windows that sort of like look towards the garden area. And I just feel like that looks really sort of like photo aesthetic, if that makes sense. And I just felt like that looks really nice. And I also paired it with a very nice simple rug. I didn't want to complex too much of the entire home. I wanted to keep it really simple. That was kind of like the main goal that I had as I was building throughout this entire build, because I wanted all of the details and colors to come from the accents and like the sort of like accessories throughout the entire home, such as like the clutter, the plants, the greenery and whatnot. Just like a lot of different colors that came from other stuff other than like the main pieces in the main rooms, if that makes sense. And we do also have a very spacious sort of movie theater room. I just feel like this home really turned out to be a lot bigger than I expected, so I was able to fit a lot of these like unique rooms into this build, such as like a gaming room, a theater, I believe like 2 or 3 offices, as well as like a very nice home library sort of like art area, if you want to call it that, as well as like a small little like gaming room as well. And I was able to sort of like incorporate all of those within this build just to like make it feel a bit more functional and extravagant, since we are sort of like working with such a huge home. And for the movie theater in general, I actually loved utilizing those spotlights going on either side of the floor, as well as like those blackout curtains, and just sort of like getting rid of that sort of traditional red theme that we have going on throughout like a lot of these like movie theaters, but rather just like sort of like making it an entire blackout room, which I feel like looks so much nicer. And I also really like bit of the room that sort of pokes out into like the garden area, which was like perfectly designed for like that sort of extra sort of like storage unit, which houses the coffee machine and the other sort of like snacks such as like popcorn and ice cream, which you can utilize as you're in the sort of like movie theater room, which I feel like worked super nicely with the sort of goal that I was going for. But yeah, right opposite that room in particular, we do have a very spacious office space, and I just really love how this turned out. And I always love utilizing this fireplace in particular. I don't know why, but there's just something about the detailing on it that looks super modern, but can really be utilized in pretty much any home, even if you're building a very traditional one. I just feel like it looks like the most realistic and yeah, just like the most suitable option when it comes to like picking a fireplace. And I honestly just loved using that Lux seat, as well as utilizing my favorite 2-seater, which is from that pastel pop kit, which I just really love the default like sort of color swatch for that 2-seater. I just feel like it looks super nice and modern, and it just works super nice with this very modern design that I was going for this office space in particular. And I used these very nice sort of like bedsides, very thin bedside tables on either side of that sofa unit, just to make it feel a bit more interesting. And honestly, I just really love utilizing that storybook nursery rug because I just feel like it works super nicely in these very contemporary and modern homes. But yeah, going back to the main like foyer sort of home area, we do actually have 2 staircases in this entire home. Since it was such a huge and extravagant home, I didn't want to populate and make the sort of like front foyer area look way too busy than it really needs to be. So I kept it to a minimal and just like thought it looked as nice as possible with as minimal clutter possible. And this is actually the main formal sort of dining area that we have in this entire build, and I didn't really want to utilize a lot of curtains throughout this entire build because I just feel like it really does mess around with the lighting quite a bit, especially if you do cover up the window. So I tend to not really do that as often, but I just really love how it turned out really nice and simple, just like a very modern sort of dining area that works really well with the rest of the entire home. And since we had a lot of space, I also incorporated a gym. I don't know if I mentioned that in the last few minutes as we were building the theater, but yeah, we do also have a very spacious gym within the build as well, which I just feel like looks really nice, and it's just like another functional room that your Sims can use if you guys are willing to play in this build. And yeah, I just utilized a bunch of different machines and whatnot, and I just wish we had more additional sort of gym equipment that we could utilize, because I just feel like despite creating a gym, there's not really that many that you can use. There's only like a few options, and unfortunately that was just like the best that I can come up with. Even though it does look a bit empty, there wasn't really much that I could do about it, because it was like a gym area and you can't really fill it up that much. And this is sort of like the home library sort of like art room that I was thinking of like creating as I was building this build. I just really love how it turned out. We actually did use the art kit that came out recently within this build as well, which I just feel like looks super nice, especially with that wall shelving with the hanging apron. I just feel like it looks super interesting. And we did also change every single like sconce, lighting, as well as like the wallpapers and flooring to match pretty much every single room in the entire home. And there's also 2 other bedrooms on the first floor, as well as like having their own en-suites and the gaming room, which I wasn't able to show because it was just quite time consuming. I wanted to like not bore you guys with too many bedroom showcases, so make sure to stick around towards the end of the video to see that all in the tour. But yeah, moving on to the second floor now, we're actually starting off with the main bedroom, and I just really love how it just turned out. This is sort of like the main color scheme that I love utilizing in my main bedrooms, which is like this very nice like white creamy sort of color with a pop of like different colors and whatnot throughout the accessories, such as like that very nice warm tint that we get from those gold sconces. And yeah, I just feel like it works really nice with the rest of the accents going on throughout the entire home, such as like that very nice brass color that we have on the pendant lighting, as well as like that sort of like tray that comes with the different candles and whatnot. And yeah, I just feel like it worked out super nicely. I just really love how this room turned out in particular, mainly because it wasn't really that big of a master bedroom, if that makes sense. It's quite like a spacious one, but it's not really, it doesn't really have a lot of empty space, if that makes sense. Most of the room is utilized and is functional and sort of incorporates necessary objects rather than having a lot of empty space, if that makes sense. But yeah, we do also utilize a lot of these like sort of like side chairs just to like accompany the room and make it feel a bit more spacious, just adding some nice plants on top of it and utilizing some bedside lamps that I don't really like utilizing, or just like haven't utilized quite often, mainly because I just really like utilizing the growing together one in particular, which I just feel like looks super modern, but I just feel like it's really important to like sort of change it up a bit and just utilize different objects here and there sometimes. But yeah, moving on to the main bathroom area. I don't really show most of my bathrooms, mainly because I just feel like it's not really that interesting to see a recording and creation of a bathroom. But this is sort of just like the main master bedroom area, so I just feel like it kind of makes more sense to show these rather than like the general sort of like public ones, if that makes sense. And they pretty much follow the same sort of like style and regime. It's mostly the same layout and whatnot. Most of them are just like catered towards the bedroom specific color. So if they had like a pinky color scheme, I would obviously change like the wallpaper or the accents and just like the small details within the room in itself. But besides that, most of the bathrooms pretty much share the entire same design and layout. And I just really love this sort of like double vanity sort of like sink unit area, and I just really like utilizing that very modern and fancy looking bathtub, which I just feel like looks super interesting. And yeah, moving on to the master bedroom sort of walk-in wardrobe area, this is more of like a thinner room, and despite being very spacious, it's just like really long and rectangular rather than it being like very wide, if that makes sense. And I wanted to just like break the normal, creating a very basic looking like going all the way down like the room. So instead I just divided one part of the sort of like shelves to be like different unit areas, and just like incorporated a mirror in between either of like the sort of like wardrobe units. And I just feel like that was like a nice touch to make it look a bit more unique and different, and added like a nice sort of like chair there just to make it feel a bit more interesting. And yeah, I just feel like this was like the perfect shape and size when it comes to like creating these walk-in wardrobes, so it doesn't take up a lot of space but it still looks like very modern and extravagant. And we did also just like add an extra sort of like details here and there just to make it feel a bit more sort of realistic and lived in, and just like changing the colors of it here and there just to make it feel a bit more like its own room rather than it all like seeming like the same thing throughout the entire room or the entire home in general. But yeah, moving on into the nursery area, we do have this very nice sort of like window that looks out into the front of the home, which has this sort of like fake balcony area which you can't access, but has this very nice window view that you can look out from, which I just feel like looked so nice and picturesque with placing the sort of like cottage right in the center of that sort of window area. And I just really love the way I just utilize the same sort of like design and style that I have going on throughout most of my nurseries, which I just really enjoy creating. Just like placing like a very nice sort of like rocking chair on one side with like the book on like the walls, as well as like using those modular wardrobe pieces as like a singular unit next to the changing table, which houses the baby clothes. I feel like it looks really realistic, and it's something that I feel like a lot of modern homes would have. So yeah, I was just really happy with how this entire room turned out in general, and I of course utilized the Storybook Nursery kit sort of rug below the sort of like nursery crib area, because I just feel like that looked super nice. And moving on to the laundry area, we're going for this very nice sort of like baby blue color for the cabinets itself, and these actually came from the cottage living expansion pack, if you guys were wondering what I'm actually utilizing for this laundry room in particular. And we do also use a lot of the laundry day kit for this room in particular as well, such as like the washing machine and the sort of like vacuums and whatnot. And I just really love the clutter that I always incorporate in most of my laundry rooms. They just turn out super nice, and I just feel like it's like a really cozy place which you can just like do your laundry in, and I just feel like it works really nicely with the rest of the functionalities of the home. And I was actually wondering of where I wanted to put it in terms of like if I wanted it to be on the second floor or the first floor, but I just feel like it kind of made sense to sort of change it up a little bit and place this laundry room on the second floor. And I did also change most of the wallpaper as well as like the flooring and the rugs just to make it all fit together. And I just really love that wainscoted and detailed sort of like floral design that we had on that wallpaper for the laundry room in particular, just to make it stand out and make it look a bit more different in comparison to the rest of the home. But yeah, moving on to the final bedroom that I'll be showing you guys in this speed build today, we are actually going for this very bright white sort of like color scheme for this bedroom in particular. And I just really love how it turned out, because despite being very plain and simple, there's just like a lot of details coming from the bed itself, from that sort of like detailing from the duvet, as well as like the wainscoted walls. And I just really love that bracketed sort of wall design that we have in the center of the room, which sort of breaks the room apart by like incorporating the fireplace and the TV unit on one side of the room, whereas like on the back side of the room you have this sort of like walk-in wardrobe sort of area which sort of divides the entire room as a whole. And you'll see a better sort of like understanding of it as we progress into the tour in a few minutes. But yeah, you can sort of like get a general understanding that this side of the bedroom is sort of like a lot more calm. You could just like sit down and just like hang out, as well as like sort of just like utilize that side of the room as like a walk-in wardrobe, which I just feel like looks super nice. And yeah, it just turned out really nice, and I was really happy about how this bedroom turned out in particular, which I just felt like looked really fancy and interesting. And we did also utilize some sort of like sofa pieces, as well as like some poofs, as well as like some gold fixtured sort of like windows and mirrors and lighting, just to make it feel a bit more fancy and glamorous. And for this ensuite itself as well, I did also want to show you guys this one as well, mainly because I just feel like this looked really nice and fancy with the incorporation of the double sinks, as well as like utilizing that very nice marble bathtub and the shower, and just like creating different like wall accents and fixtures just to like break up the entire room overall and not make it look all the same, if that makes sense. And of course utilizing my very favorite wall sconce which came from the Growing Together expansion pack, which I just feel like looks super nice. And yeah, pretty much just like cluttering up the entire space, making it look a bit more realistic. And yeah, that is pretty much it for this entire speed build. And then I pretty much go around the entire home and just add extra details for the sort of like landing areas of the entire home. Kind of made sense to leave them a little bit empty, but I did want to add some details here and there, such as like adding some love seats and tables on some parts of the walls or the hallways, just to make them feel like they're not really that empty, as well as like some additional seating area in certain parts of the sort of like landing and like huge hallways that we have, such as like this part in particular, which houses these very nice, simple and glamorous looking hallways. And we did also go to the exterior of the home and the garden to add some additional sort of seating areas and whatnot, as well as like some outdoor lighting and some just like very nice sun lounges. And yeah, that is pretty much it for this entire speed build. So thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you guys think by leaving a like and subscribing, and comment down below what you guys think about this build, if you guys like it, if you guys didn't like it. We also have a bunch more videos like this on the channel if you guys are interested in things like these. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video.